everybody. This is Glass Onion on John Lennon. There's no special intro this week. We're going straight in, so you won't get to hear me talking for about 10 minutes about the Niagara Reels this week. Sorry about that. This is the first of two shows I put together for John Lennon's posthumous 80th birthday. And I thought it would be a nice idea for some of my most loyal listeners who very often send me feedback straight after the episodes have gone out. I thought it'd be nice to give them a chance to come on the air and talk about John Lennon and the Glass Onion podcast as well. So we've got three for you today. And first up is Paul Killingley from Australia. So Paul, how you doing, mate?
Pretty good. G'day, and nice to be talking to you.
Excellent. You did send me some biographical details about yourself, and you've done a great deal of theatre, and you're also a musician. So can you tell us about that, first of all?
Yes, well, I started doing music probably when I was about 17 or so, and I used to go busking. But I also got involved with amateur theatre, doing things like Godspell and Pippin, which was a favourite. I love that show. A few things like that. And apart from that, the rest of the time after doing the theatre, I worked in a theme park playing music. Theme park was a recreation of Sydney when it was first settled in 1800. So we were walking around the place like redcoat soldiers and convicts, playing the music of the period, which was good fun. And after that, rock and roll bands and solo stuff. Yeah, so I've been doing that for about 30 odd years.
And did you busk some John Lennon songs or Beatles songs?
Sure did. Well, that was the thing. The Beatles were the catalyst to get me into music. And so the first albums I ever had really were Beatle albums. So I just listened to all of those, and there I was. I could hardly play a guitar, and I was trying to sing "I Am the Walrus" and whatever to the old ladies walking past. So it would have scared the crapper out of America.
What do you think of the most buskable John Lennon songs? I suppose he's imagined too much of a shameless popularity song, because I think I played that once when I was busking, but it seemed too obvious. I don't know. What do you think?
No, it's a bit of a go-to song because people do like it, and they will drop a few coins in if you do go busking. It's funny. My music has gone sort of full term where I go busking a fair bit nowadays, over the last few years, because when you get older, the pub gigs sort of disappear on you. But imagine I've done things like the Norwegian Wood are really good because on one guitar you can sort of pick up the melody, and his songs are easier to do than Paul's songs because Paul's songs are all so much higher.
Yeah. I think obviously this is George, but Here Comes the Sun's got the same sort of thing as Norwegian Wood, that thing about the D shape where you are playing the melody as you're singing it as well. So
yeah, that's great. And those ones, if you just got a guitar and, I've got a guitar and a harmonica and a little stomp box. So it's the more you can do on one guitar that makes it sound sort of like a bit like a band, the better.
Yeah, I used to have a battery amp as well. So I could put phasing and stuff. Interesting thing busking, isn't it?
It's good fun. It's as long as they don't set the dogs onto you or the fire hose. They get a bit cranky about it here in Australia. Tend to chase you away. But anyway, you've got to have a thick hide.
Yeah. All right, so I sent an email to you guys, and we've got a few bullet points to hit, and then feel free to go off on any tangents you feel like as well.
Yeah.
Right, so first up, what's your John Lennon / Beatles origin story? Is there an event, a book, a song, an album that sparked your interest?
Yeah, well, I was born in 1963, so there was just a few things whilst they were all still doing it in the 60s that I can remember hearing Yesterday on the radio, and I can remember hearing Hey Jude, and I can remember Let It Be. I can remember those songs and being aware of who was singing them. And then, my first real introduction to the Beatles and John Lennon was watching the cartoon as a kid on TV. And the caricature of John was fantastic. He just looked like such a hero. It was great. And the songs were brilliant. Loved all those early songs from that. So that was sort of my introduction to it. From there, my sister had the Red album, so I'd listen to the Red album. I went and bought the Blue album. That was great, all these songs. And then the box set came out in early 1980, and I bought that. I was about 17 at the time. I found a biography, so I learnt this story, which was just absolutely astounding. Then I found a copy of his two books in his own right and A Spaniard and the Works all in one volume. I thought, this guy's just insane. He was the funniest thing I've ever read when I was reading those books, and then the songs were great, and I thought, well, that's just astounding. It's really good. Apart from that too, my dad's name was John. My son is John. Everybody in the world that was important seemed to be John, whether it was Kennedy or John Wayne or the Prime Minister was John Gorton. Everybody that was important was John. So Lennon, I thought, geez, he must be important too. So that was my early take.
Your name Paul.
Yeah, well, that's true, yeah.
Is that a coincidence or possibly not?
I think that was a biblical thing, actually. My old man was a minister.
Oh, I see, right.
Yeah, son of a preacher man.
That's a good tune, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah. So I'm often related to it.
I've never actually seen any of the Beatles cartoons. Are they more or less similar to Yellow Submarine in terms of the caricatures? Or?
No, not like that. That was a lot more surreal. It's basically a Hard Day's Night, I would say. And it was dead set caricature. I'm sure they're out there on YouTube. They'd have girls chasing them, then something would happen, and then they'd burst into a song. But I can remember there was one episode of it where they actually played Strawberry Fields, which seemed rather bizarre in their Hard Day's Night outfits. I think the Paul character said, "Oh, that was really good, John," afterwards. Not really for the 5-year-old kids that were watching it, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay. What about books? What were the first John Lennon or Beatles books that you read that sort of fleshed the story out for you?
I've read a number of them through the 80s, kept on buying them then. The Ray Coleman one, the Coleman, and what's the other one that you compare the two to? It's Coleman and Goldman, that's right, yeah. So I read both of those. I read Dakota Days. That was fun. There was one called something about the in-house hippie or something, and it was a guy that was hired by Apple and just the comings and goings in Apple. That was funny.
Richard DeLello, yeah, the longest coat.
That's the bloke.
That's a great.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's.
I'll have to read that one again. It's been 20 years since I read that.
It's just bizarre. Look, I read Brian Epstein's as well. That was a good read. I enjoy all the stories so much. They read like the greatest adventure story of all time. Everything is so improbable. Everything had to happen in the right order, meeting the right people all the way through. It makes for a great read.
Have you heard of the singer Robin Hitchcock?
No.
Right. His music is, he'll tell you this himself. His music is slightly derivative of sort of Beatles and Dylan and a bit of Syd Barrett. Yeah. If you ever get the chance to listen to him on a podcast, he's a very, very good podcast guest. He was talking about the Beatles and he said, what are the chances that you would have 3 guys who grew up in Liverpool at the same time, who all turned out to be fantastic songwriters, who are all the same height and all had sort of brown hair that was conducive to being in a mop?
Absolutely.
And Mark Lewison did a great job with Tune In of bringing out the magical, improbability of it all, as you just said, yeah.
Yeah, that's never escaping, and then having Ringo there being sort of the runt of the litter, the little guy that's a bit shorter and a bit funny looking, and he was the most popular one on their first tour of America as well. Absolutely. So he was so important in so many ways, and people that don't know like to put him down and say, oh, he didn't know what he was doing, but geez, he was just perfect for them. What he does on that recording of A Day in the Life, the drumming of that is just beautiful, just on its own. You could listen to that and forget the rest. It's just fantastic.
Another one that stands out is Here Comes the Sun, because that middle, the sun, 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 here we come. It's a very strange time. That's something like 11/8. I don't know exactly what it is. And those fills that Ringo puts in there, oh, man.
I heard him interviewed about it, and he said, George played it, and he said, you can't count that. You just got to feel it and know where it is and learn it, and it's beautiful playing. It's just so seamless.
Absolutely. Right. Any favourite or least favourite John Lennon songs or albums?
Well, I thought about this. With the Beatles albums, I really think Rubber Soul is a great album. It's really complete. I sort of get there and understand all of the experimental stuff, but for me it's not quite as listenable as when they were just purely wanting to really write the good songs and put a good job on them and just put a little bit of strangeness into them, a little bit of sitar in Norwegian wood, if you like. So, I love all the early stuff, and Rubber Soul, I think, that really sticks out as a good one.
The end of 65 was the end of an era. And
yes.
I have a soft spot for Rubber Soul for various reasons, partly to do with when I first heard it, but also, you're a guitarist as well. That Rubber Soul is a fantastic album for sitting down with an acoustic guitar because you can more or less play the whole album.
Absolutely, yeah. Good songs on that album, really is.
Yeah. Well, one thing I didn't realise until we did did you hear the Best Songs show I did with Jason Barnard?
Yes, I did, yes.
Yeah. Girl was John's kind of Euro song. Greek-sounding guitars over a German two-step. And we had the French thing with Michelle. I don't know if that was a response or not. I think they were responding all the time to each other, weren't they? So it's possible. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it was the healthy rivalry up until that point was brilliant for the songwriting, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, George Martin had a good analogy. You know what the tug of war is? We have to pull the rope.
Yep.
He said John and Paul were like tugging on a rope while smiling at each other. George Martin was very good with his analysis.
A very clever man. Very, very clever.
Good interviewee as well. Any songs you could pick out?
Hey Bulldog is what a hidden little gem that is. It's just a great song. It's just superb. I can't go past A Day in the Life. I think that's a superb work of art. Great singing, beautiful playing, great ideas. I love Strawberry Fields, and I really like a lot of those early songs where John sang so loud. He had the loudest voice. He hadn't damaged his vocal cords with all of the illicit stuff and cigarettes quite so much back then. Yeah. He had a big, big voice. Things like Bad Boy. What a vocal on that.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. It's just got such energy. Yeah, so I love those early songs for that. Good writing and just the sheer balls of it. It's unbelievable.
I'd never heard any vocals in the 80s like Twist and Shout, how raw that was. I mean, that was just something I never knew that people could sing like that, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, and the recordings are just fantastic for what they had. There was probably a little 2-track or something back then, but they just sound so big. One of the other songs I think, and it was a sort of a made-to-order song, and I think, geez, he did a good job with that, was All You Need Is Love for that TV special, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I put that together for that, and I thought, well, what do I think? Write a song for this, okay. And he comes up with that, and it's an astounding song. It's got a crazy time thing in the middle of it, and so positive. What a great song it is.
That one's aging really well as well.
Yeah, I think so. From the early ones, I don't really like When I Get Home, Love You Till the Cows Come Home, good grief. Little Child has got the worst harmonica in the world on it.
I always liked that, though, just because it was bad. There's loads of really bad harmonica on Dylan's albums as well.
Yeah. I just cringe when I hear that. I think, oh, geez, put it away, John. Yeah, so... and his later ones, things like Nigger of the World, I think he was a bit heavy-handed with a few of these things in the 70s. You ask, what's your favourite album, what's your favourite song? Well, that's what it is at the moment this week or something. But, you hear a particular song and you go, well, that's just the best. And then you think, well, what album did that come from? You listen to the album and think, well, how can you go past that? It continually evolves, It's you hear things and think, boy, that's good.
I think also if you step away a bit and don't listen to them for a while, which I don't really, I mean, I listen to them when I'm researching episodes, but they're kind of cliche, but they're already in my head anyway, so...
That's right, yeah. I wouldn't play them very often, but if where I am at the moment, I've had workers here doing some renovations and they have their radio going all the time. I reckon 1 in 5 songs is Beatles related. They're on, golden hits and greatest memories or whatever it is. But, there's just so many Beatles songs that happen or people that had something to do with the Beatles. It's amazing.
And of course, they're being the quality of them is improving all the time. I mean, I'm a bit cynical about remasters and remixes, but in certain cases, they bring out the bass and drums particularly, which I like, and maybe they make the vocals sound sharper. I mean, they're the same songs. They're just gradually sounding better and better. Yeah,
the bass and drums got a little bit lost in the 60s, and, so, bringing them out really does, it makes it a fatter sound as well. So it's, and it's good to hear. You think, gee, that's what he was doing there. That's great.
Yeah, little bits come out as well. That's the other magical thing, little bits of guitar or vocals.
Yep.
Okay. Could you tell me how you first discovered Glass Onion and if you have any favourites or I'm not going to ask you what your least favourite episodes are.
Well, I like them all. I just really look forward to any of the episodes. It's a friend of mine put me in touch with podcasts. So I thought, I'll look up things that interest me, such as the Beatles or cricket. And I found your one probably around about episode 5 or 6 or 7 or something. And I thought, this sounds really interesting. I'd listened to some other podcasts as well, and I liked the way you present it. So I backtracked and I listened to them all driving between Sydney and North Queensland. And it's great. It really made the trip go so much faster. I thought, that's really good. So a new show would come out every week or 2 weeks that you did. And it was like having a friend overseas. That was really, really lovely. And I thought, all the same things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Just about all of your opinions. I go, yep, I agree with that as well. That sounds fantastic. Your voice is really nice on podcasts as well. It reminds me a little bit of Ray Davies when I've heard him interviewed.
Oh, right.
And it sounded a little bit like him. But favourite episodes, I really like the Revolution number 9 episode. One, because you loved it so much and you put so much into it. It was great to hear your enthusiasm for it, but also the analysis was fascinating. I never really put it together with the world events of 1968 the way you did, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. And looking at it as John Lennon's artistic reaction to the year itself and how he sort of got to that year through all the other years was really good. I did enjoy that one. I like number 36, which was your solo one, and you sort of dedicated it to the loyal fans. I played it again recently so I could just catch up with it all again. It was just great. I really loved it. The thing that's really good is all of the historical context that you put in there too. Having, you think, this happened 1965, and then all of these other events happen as well. I thought, right, okay, so you see how songs or attitudes or events that are John Lennon related might have been born out of other world events that were happening at the same time. you've obviously done a lot of research. It's brilliant.
I do remember from that 65 episode, fascinating to look at the world events and the John Lennon Beatles event, and to see that suddenly the recording of Satisfaction or Ticket to Ride or Help or Rolling Stone, like a Rolling Stone, really doesn't mean much when, it's the same day as the Rolling Thunder campaign in Vietnam, that kind of thing.
Yes.
That was something that sort of came up while I was researching that. It's good to get these things in context. I mean, you said you're a cricket fan. I mean, I'm a cricket fan as well, and I like various sports, but I think sport is a good example where you have to kind of put it in context, that it's fun and it's important within itself, Yep. Episode 36, that was kind of an addendum. I'd done the episode about John Lennon's assassination.
Yes.
And then I was drawing parallels between Mark Chapman, myself, John Lennon, and Marlon Brando. I suppose it was a bit risky to do that, but then I thought, well, this is not my job. I can more or less do what I want, and some people possibly are not going to like it, but I actually received very little, messages or anything. I had a couple of people, but this is a very cathartic thing. I think any podcaster will tell you that. And I think I've taken the opportunity to make it very personal. And I'm hoping that that's what people connect with. And it was so lovely to get your message a few months ago. I tell you, it's the most heartwarming thing is to hear someone say, oh, I'm driving down the highway in Australia and your podcast is, helping the journey. I mean, that's just warms my heart, I tell you.
I really have enjoyed them so much. It's been great. I mean, for a start, too, you don't know me from a bar of soap, but I end up knowing you because I'm listening to you. Yeah. And then I thought, he's born in 75, I'm born in 63. It's almost like we're Julian and Sean. This is brilliant, It's brotherhood through the Beatles is quite a great thing.
Like I say, at the end, I brought in the stuff with myself and John Lennon and Marlon Brando because I found a lot of the people that I'm interested in culturally, and Lennon and Brando are two of those, and someone like Muhammad Ali as well.
Yes.
Very interesting where you find the parallels between them.
Yeah.
Marlon Brando had a kind of need to save the world as well. He was involved with the civil rights struggle. John Lennon was involved with activism, and sort of deep down psychologically, in a way, it's to do with healing their own trauma. Not to say that they don't have good intentions. I think they did, but you kind of get to the same place where you find in the end, as John Lennon found, you're making your life incredibly difficult by attacking the establishment, the American establishment. Can you imagine one guy and, yes, he had millions of followers, but the people he was actually working with was a small group against the American establishment and the CIA and the FBI. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, you can't beat City Hall, as they say. It's just too hard. It's amazing, those three people as well there, the famous ones, Marlon and John and Muhammad Ali too, starting from such ordinary stock and just being ordinary people and then becoming extraordinary people through the extraordinary things they achieved. And then that seemed to give them some sort of insight as well. Perhaps they were insightful all the way through, and that's how they became extraordinary. I think that's what it is. But it's Muhammad Ali was just such an amazing person as well. He's very John Lennon-like. I loved his poem that he wrote. He wrote a 2-word poem, me, we. And I thought, boy, that's beautiful.
That's right, yeah. Of course, he had the physical presence as well. That was the difference,
I know.
A Scottish journalist whose name I always forget, I think it was Harry Benson, who was there when Cassius Clay, as he was then, met the Beatles in 64 in Miami. When Clay came through the door, the whole thing of, how big he was, because he wasn't even big for a heavyweight, but he was big compared to a normal guy.
Yeah.
Plus the charisma, plus how handsome he was and everything. The whole effect was remarkable. If you watch, for example, Brando interviews, there's a slight fear on the part of the interviewer because there's something slightly scary about Marlon Brando. And I think there was something scary about John Lennon, depending what mood he was in,
Oh, totally. He was very angry. Yeah, very angry. So you just didn't want to try and get him offside or anything. It's just a difference too that John Lennon had too from those interviews and later songs in the Beatles as well. From that poor time when he was crucified, if you like the saying, the Beatles are bigger than Christ, and how he was just floundering there. And then the sheer freedom he had within a couple of years to just say, Christ, it ain't easy, in a song that went to number one.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just a sort of conclusion of that part of our talk really is just to say that podcasts are very cathartic and I recommend them.
Oh, look, if I was clever enough and had anything to say of any interest, I'd give it a crack. But I think it'd be me listening to it, and that's about it, unfortunately. I loved it when you had the guitar too, because when you were playing the songs, I thought, well, I can play that song. And I thought, geez, you just sound like me playing that song, and then you're singing it. Oh, it sounds so similar. Because that was really, really nice to hear. And when you did the Dylan one too, It's All Right, Ma. Wow. So good. What a song.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah, just that set of lyrics alone would validate a whole career almost. There's so much in that, and there's a couple of like sort of 10-page analyses of that online.
It's just insane. And you did one with Ben Burrell. Is that the fella's name that does the Dylan podcast? I love his podcast. I think he writes it all out first, and it's in essay form, and it's beautiful. Once again, he's got a beautiful voice to listen to, and I love his podcast. Really, really good.
Me too, yeah. Direct listeners. It's Bob Dylan album by album, and then he's got another one called Long Player.
Yep. I've listened to other podcasts as well. One of the things which I think they sort of get wrong, they discuss the albums as being, oh, this album doesn't quite work because an album should be this and an album should be that. But, you know, those early Beatles albums were really just a collection of songs like every other album that was out at that point. It wasn't the concept of album being a concept wasn't really anything back then. If anything, the Beatles did their first concept album, their first one, by, George Martin saying, okay, we've got to have a pot boiler to start it, and we've got to have a real beauty to finish it, and we'll do all this stuff back all the way through it. We'll have a cameo from Ringo, we'll have a cameo from George, there you go. And so basically that was a concept album. I don't know that anyone else ever did that then. And they followed that format pretty much all the way through.
Yeah, if you think about it, Please Please Me, I mean, starting with, that 1, 2, 3, 4, and then finishing with Twist and Shout, I mean, wow. And
absolutely.
And obviously finishing with the Beatles with Money as well. They kind of did the same trick.
Yeah.
But albums are always going to be a collection of songs to some extent because it's a group of songs. Now, whether they have a theme is a whole other thing, but the majority of albums, I don't think they have necessarily a theme. I think they have a sound. I think concept album is a tricky territory. But
it is a tricky territory. That said, though, I can remember when I first heard Help, the album Help, and I think the last two songs are Yesterday and Dizzy Miss Lizzie, and I thought, they sort of don't belong in this album. I think it's already finished. And then they threw on a couple of songs at the end. It had that sort of feel to it. So I do get it when people say, oh, I'm not sure if that actually works, or, the good song's buried halfway through and perhaps it should have opened it or whatever. But I think that back in those days, they weren't as worried about that. They just thought best song first and then fill it full of fillers and try and make $1.
I think also you've got to factor in that in the Beatles case, I mean, everything was being done at breakneck speed, and a very good podcast, actually, a Beatles one, is called Nothing Is Real. I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Oh, I do. I listen to those blokes. They're good fun.
Just in case they're listening, I just want to tell them that I listened to their Beatles for Sale episode. And
yes, I listen to that.
Yeah, they're absolutely right. There is a sort of, I don't know what you call it, a meme or a popular opinion that's a very tired album. And I'll be honest, I still hear a bit of that in the second side of that album. I'm still not massively keen on every little thing and what you're doing, things like that. But I think some of the decisions were made because they didn't have time to spend lots of time thinking about it. I don't mean this harshly at all. They did sort of fill out Help with covers.
Yes.
But, I mean, give them a break. They're producing 2 albums of almost original material every year and doing all these other things.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny with the Beatles for Sale that I love that album. I love every minute of it. I just think it's fantastic. Every little thing, I love that song. What you're doing, I love those ones. I like those dinky little ballads that they used to write back then. Bad to Me, World Without Love. I think they're just perfectly arranged little pieces of poetry with great melodies put over the top. The things that a lot of people don't love, I quite like. I did hear an interesting one recently where some music professor was talking about It's Only Love, and he said, listen to the melody of that, then listen to the melody of Benefit of Mr. Kite, and it's almost identical.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
But it's funny, quite often people don't love particular songs, and I go, oh, geez, but I really like that one. I know the Irish guys really don't like Michelle, and I think, gee, that's a good song. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's funny the way it goes, because, I mean, I would have always said, because I do occasional guest appearances on other podcasts, and they often ask, what's your favourite or least favourite Beatles song? And I would have said Bungalow Bill up to a certain time. And then when the White Album 50th box set came out in 2018, I was just so impressed by that, both the remaster and all the extra bits. I thought I'd heard most of it, but then obviously I hadn't. But suddenly, for some unknown reason, I don't know why, Bungalow Bill suddenly just became a huge favourite of mine. I don't know why. I think it's something to do with the meter of the lyric, like where he says, The children asked him if to kill was not a sin. Not when he looked so fierce, his mummy patted him. If looks could kill, it would have been us instead of him. I mean, I don't even know what that means, but...
That's right, yeah. Look, it's funny. When I first listened to the Beatles, I was drawn towards all the granny music. I loved all of Paul's granny music stuff, and I loved Bungalow Bill, and I loved Rocky Raccoon. I thought that was fantastic. I was just a silly 17-year-old, but I was drawn towards all the fun ones like that. I thought Maxwell Silver Hammer was great fun. I thought that was great. Whereas I couldn't tolerate I Want You, She's So Heavy. I thought, it goes on forever. Boy, that's boring. But nowadays, I think that's a great song. I think it's aged so well. You could put it on top 40 stuff nowadays and it'd sit there quite nicely.
All right. I mean, we could go on forever, but I've got to get the other two on.
No worries.
This is going out. This may even be going out on the 9th of October. So John Lennon's posthumous 80th birthday. I mean, he's still around us, isn't he? Even though physically he's not, the music and the words. What's his place in the world, would you say, at the moment?
Well, I thought about this. And to quote himself, he was just a singer in a rock and roll band that made it very big. That's all. That's what the man said. But, he just was an ordinary person living in a funny little place in England called Liverpool. I've been there and I've looked at his house and walked around the streets and went to the cabin and did all the bits. It's just a little place. I mean, it's a big city, but it's just a provincial and everything like that. But I think what he had was the gift of the gab. He could talk and he could come up with such eloquent, articulate, witty things to say, and actually had that in his writing as well, whether it was his books or his songs. And as they developed, he was so succinct. And interviewers would ask him daft questions and he would come up with the most amazing answers. So articulate, so witty. An ordinary guy that's just had an extraordinary life. And I think it all comes down to his quickness of mind, the gift of the gab, and the way he could just put things in a nutshell and put it out there. Well, you need his love? Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a very obscure interview that Mike McCartney did in about 1982. It was on YouTube, I think, but it's disappeared now. Yep. And someone asked him about John Lennon. He said something that was extremely profound, especially for a Saturday morning kids show. He said the thing about John Lennon was that he was very, very complicated in terms of his psychology, but in the same way, he could make everything extremely simple.
Yes.
And in fact, part of that was John Lennon even said that a lot of that came from the blues, because the blues, they say 3 chords and the truth and all that. But verbally, I think, as well as the songs, I think if you take the interviews, although he wasn't around very long, relatively speaking, but he did enough interviews that there's plenty of the words from the interviews plus the audio. One thing he said was that if the Beatles had one message, it was learn to swim. And once you've learned to swim, swim. It sounds ridiculously simple. It's just saying, go for it. Don't intellectualize swimming. Just learn to swim and start swimming.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and his one-word slogans were brilliant. All we're saying is give peace a chance, if you like. And it just sounds like a very simple, glib thing, but if you blare it out and have 100 people singing it, or thousands as they do sometimes, immensely powerful. The simplicity of it too, unbelievable, yeah. Yeah,
well, a book I'd recommend is And in the End by Ken McNabb. I don't know if you've read that.
I haven't read that. I'll love it.
Last year, but...
Yes.
And one of the things was that in November 1969, there was a Vietnam moratorium, and there's 500,000 people singing Give Peace a Chance.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. He also had the ability to have his finger on the pulse of the world at the right time, probably just before the pulse actually even happened. He just seemed to be able to nail it immediately. That was the incredible ability of him.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that he's normal, but in a funny way wasn't, because him and Brando as well, they were very, very quirky, eccentric people, and I totally get what you mean. That he was normal. He wasn't a god who came down from Mount Olympus. He's in an incredibly ordinary place. But in a way, he's almost even more significant now, because now we have social media. I think the one thing that is working in his favor is that nowadays we live in a culture where our attention spans are being attacked, I would say, for want of a better word, and that I personally, I make a huge effort to keep my attention span from being decimated by, trying to read books in a good stretch and listen to a whole album, rather than get lost in this sort of listen to half a song and then get bored and change it. But the fact that John Lennon could boil things down to slogans, that kind of makes it even more valid nowadays, because
for sure
need that, So I'm going to give you the final word before we finish.
Well, if you ever tried to imagine the world without some of the big heroes we've ever had, whether it's Elvis or the Beatles, or in this case it's John Lennon, you just think, what would the world look like? How would it be? How would it be musically? I'm sure we would have survived somehow, but the overarching reach that he had on music all over the place, and then on people and in concepts and politics and peace and all that sort of stuff as well. Just an amazing person with a huge influence. And, you know, when he was a little boy, who would have ever thought it?
Yeah, I think the voice is a lot of it. I mean, the singing voice, obviously we know that there's very few John Lennon songs that aren't treated with either double tracking or decent amount of reverb, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But even within that, even though that was a technical thing that he sort of put across to George Martin or whoever was the producer or the engineer, he must have had a sense that, you know, for something like Dear Prudence, I mean, he sounds a bit like a child. And obviously My Mummy's Dead, he sounds very much like a child. And Love, you know, the vocal of Love is just how delicate. I mean, you're wondering how the hell did they get that? I mean, how much of that is John's voice and how much of that is the way it's treated? It's obviously both, but I think in the end it's the voice, because I was just saying, I was telling you earlier, I was in India last year, and I took 3 fairly horrendous train journeys, and I actually had the Lennon Legend compilation loaded on my iPod. And I remember listening to that. And, you know, you're listening to that in the middle of the night when you can't sleep on this train hurtling through India. And you've got John Lennon's voice in your ears. And it kind of got me through those journeys in a way. It's amazing considering the amount I've listened to it. You know, it still has that power.
That's another thing. I mean, what a superb voice for rock and roll. But then he could just bring it all the way back to things like Oh My Love too. For the first time in my life, what a delicate little piece, beautifully put. But then he could just belt it like nothing else, you know. Amazing ability and such power.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been fantastic. Thanks, Paul. And stay on the line for a sec and we'll just we'll have a chat. We'll do some after show, not analysis, no. Chatting only. Chatting.
Excellent.
So thanks for being on the show, and please keep listening and keep giving me feedback, and all the best.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, take care, mate. Bye. Okay, my second guest, if that doesn't sound too formal, is Miss Stephanie Sadie. How are you today, Stephanie?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, doing well. Back on the podcast train. Well, I mean, I never stopped recording, but I've just as usual, giving myself a huge backlog of editing, but it'll all get out there eventually. So,
absolutely. I look forward to hearing it.
Thank you very much. Now, you're from the Midlands. As I was saying earlier, got a lovely mix, because I've got an Australian, a guy with an incredibly strong Bristol accent.
Love Bristol.
Yeah. Whereabouts are you from?
I'm from Wolverhampton in the West Midlands, unfortunately.
Oh, what's wrong with that?
No, it's not exactly Liverpool, you know. I much prefer to live there, but this will do for now.
Can you do like a Dudley accent? Is it?
I'm not doing that.
A really outrageous accent, yeah. Okay. Okay, so I emailed you all some ideas, so we'll go through those, but feel free to go off on any tangents that you like to, as long as they're more or less John Lennon based.
Okay.
But I always start with asking the guest their John Lennon / Beatles origin story. Was there an event, a book, a song, an album, etc. that sparked your interest? So how about that?
Well, it's quite a strange story, actually. I mean, it started very, very early with me. I was very young. I just learnt to read. Now, I can't remember the exact age. I don't want to embarrass myself by saying like 9, because I believe I was much younger than that. But my mother sent me into the living room with the local newspaper. And I think she was doing some kind of cleaning or work or whatnot. She says, go in there, just read the paper, leave me alone. And you used to have the local listings for the television stations. I think it was just like BBC 1, 2, ITV and Channel 4 at the time. Yep. And I remember reading through, and I saw Help. The movie Help would be on TV. And reading through the names, it didn't really strike a chord with me until I got to the name Paul McCartney, funnily enough. And I remember I called my mother into the living room and I says, Mom, Paul McCartney, like, I know this name. And she says, yeah, the Beatles, they were a band. When I was young, you know, they were so famous. I'll record it for you. So she actually recorded the movie for me off TV. And I watched that film so many times in my childhood that the tape actually snapped. And the moment for me, the defining moment for me when I knew that this was something different, this was special, was John singing You've Got to Hide Your Love Away on his guitar. And that voice, and the first time I watched that movie, we had a knock at the front door. My mum shouted, get the door. And I remember just literally running through the hall, opening the front door, didn't care who it was, and just running back into the living room because that voice was so enchanting. It was almost spiritual, the feeling. And that never left me with John Lennon's voice. That every time I hear it now, it gives me goosebumps, you know. It was beautiful. It was a moment that stuck with me forever. And I like other bands. I like different kinds of music, but never has there been a moment like that moment there. And from that day, it was an addiction. I mean, other children at school were watching kids' TV programs. I was watching Help on a Hard Day's Night. Like I say, so often that the tape actually snapped. My parents had to hunt down the VHS copy for me. Right. And I was in pieces, you know, I couldn't relax until I got it again. And even to this day, I know that film word for word. And it hit me as something that I'd never experienced anything like that in my young life. I remember watching promos and the girls screaming and it just literally took my breath away. But John Lennon was special. He stood out to me. He stood out to me on a level which I can't necessarily put into words, especially at such a young age. Yeah. There was just something there, something relatable, the voice, he stood out, you know. He definitely did. I don't know if that was his talent or some kind of divine presence that he had, but he was definitely special.
Do you think the fact that he wasn't around, I'm not saying, I mean, I have said this on the show, as you probably know, that a lot of the mystique around him is because he died young. Yeah, same as, you know, he didn't die as young as Jimmy and Janis and Brian Jones or Kurt Cobain, but he did die young. Did you know at that point when you first got into the Beatles that he wasn't around? Or did you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't know? That's interesting because that kind of proves that it wasn't because of that. Yeah, that's interesting, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, everything you've said there, I mean, millions, possibly even billions, perhaps not billions, but lots of millions of people would agree with you that there is something that's very hard to define. And I was kind of going to come to that later, yeah. The thing I remember about the Help film is that I remember all the dialogue bits were really corny, but then it absolutely just came to life whenever they performed. Did you find that?
Well, as a child at that age, I was quite impressed. Yeah, but looking back now, yes, I understand completely. I see where you're coming from. I still think it stands the test of time. I love that film. And maybe it's because of the sentimental memories there, but yeah, it still speaks to me. I love it.
I think most people, if you ask them, I mean, of course, this is all subjective, but the experts, let's say, would probably say Hard Day's Night's a better film in terms of, you know, the techniques and everything. And we know, you know, the Beatles were smoking weed for breakfast during Help, which might explain some of it. But
you can kind of tell that, can't you?
Just a little bit, yeah. But I think it's sort of taken on a life of its own, that film, because obviously it's been remastered. You know, the sound is better, the picture's better, and it's become very much of its time, that sort of pre-psychedelic, you know, 65, very colourful. I think there's a word for it. Someone on the show's used a word, but I can't remember what it is. Very colourful, but not quite psychedelic, you know.
Yeah.
What about John Lennon books? How many have you read, and are there any that stand out?
Well, quite a few, to be honest with you. I mean, at the moment, I'm listening to the Audible Philip Norman John Lennon book.
Oh, wow.
I think I've got like 10 hours left of that now. But the first John Lennon book I read was Ray Coleman. And that was my bedtime read. It's really sad, isn't it? You know, other children were reading like, I don't know, like Fantastic Five, and I'm there with Ray Coleman's John Lennon. Yeah, I've read Nowhere Man. Oh, there's quite a few, to be honest with you. The only one which I have and haven't read is the Goldman. I don't think I can quite bring myself to read that.
Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole now because I think that's been well covered on the show. But yeah, no, I mean, the Ray Coleman's definitely, I mean, that was my first John Lennon book. And if listeners haven't heard episode 1, that's when I sort of told my origin story, and I've made a point of not retelling it. But just to say that, yeah, I got that book and I bunked off school, and I couldn't believe this character I was reading about, even though that's could be argued is quite a sanitized version. It's not that sanitized, you know, still deals with all the dark stuff in his life. But I just remember this sort of enigmatic character, you know. I didn't know that he was a rebel at school at that point. I mean, I was about 13 or 14. And if you remember on the jacket, it says something like, the man whose complex personality won him the love of millions.
Yeah.
And I like the sound of that. And, you know, and then when obviously I got to the end of the book and I read about the untimely end, I mean, it was awful. It was, you know, a lot of people will tell you it's like hearing about a friend dying, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very hard to pin this down, isn't it?
Yeah, I think my mother was the person that broke the news to me when I was going through my massive Beatles phase. And you're right, it did feel like losing a friend. I felt like I was starting at the beginning and getting to know this person and reading about his life, and then to be told that he was no longer around, it was disappointing in a way. You know, it felt like the story was unfinished.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do blame John Lennon for my wild teenage years. I do think he was an absolutely terrible influence.
Yeah, well, my mum said something quite interesting, actually. At some point she said, oh, you know the Beatles have ruined your life? And I was like, oh, what do you mean? This is a long time ago, she said, oh, yeah, because you think the world is going to be as magical as it seems when you listen to their records. And it's not, you know, it's mundane. Oh, obviously there's magic in the world, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But you know what I mean? I
agree, yeah.
Kind of like John Lennon. I mean, George Martin said it about John Lennon, you know, normal life just wasn't interesting enough for him. That's why he preferred this sort of dream world, you know, and obviously LSD and everything kind of sent him even more in that direction.
Yeah.
That's another rabbit hole. But all right, I'm going to ask you favourite and least favourite John Lennon songs or albums or both, whatever you feel like.
Right, okay. So this doesn't include the Beatles. This is just John Lennon.
Okay.
So I would say Mind Games would be my favourite.
Ah, interesting.
It's kind of cool between Mind Games and Plastic Ono Band.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always torn between the two. If I think, I'll pop on my favourite John album, but that's the point where I kind of freeze and I'm like, right, this is the choice to make today, depending on my mood. So yeah, I would go with Mind Games. I kind of like where he was at that point in time. And I think you can kind of hear it in the music.
Yeah.
So I definitely go with Mind Games. It's closely followed by Plastic Ono Band. But Plastic Ono Band's the record that you put on the day when you just want to kind of smash the house up, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, a bit heavy.
Yeah, definitely. Least favourite, I would go with a rock and roll album. I don't even kind of see that as a John album. It's like a bit of a throwaway, isn't it?
Have you heard the Roots, the sort of bootleg version?
No, I haven't.
It was bad, really, because Maurice Levy, who he had all the trouble with You Can't Catch Me sounding like, Come Together sounding like You Can't Catch Me. It was a bit complicated, but Maurice Levy actually put out a sort of unauthorized version of the rock and roll album called Roots. John Lennon sings the hits or something like that. But it's actually worth listening to because the sound quality is not so good, but that kind of makes it sound a bit more raw.
Yeah.
Because I think that album, there's stuff on that album that I absolutely love, you know, in Stand By Me, obviously, Just Because, Do You Want to Dance? But I think in the end, it all sounds a bit smooth and perhaps not very rock and roll.
Yeah, it feels very unauthentic.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, we know, I mean, you know, those sessions went wrong and he kind of came back in and with a clear head and sort of redid it. Because he did it in such a professional way, then it came out sounding a bit slick. Favourite and least favourite songs, if you can pin one down.
Oh dear, the hard questions. I mean, my least favourite tend to stay the same, but my most favourite changes every day. So at the moment, so many, Anthony, I can't believe you're doing this to me.
Well, I gave you a week to prepare, though.
You did. To be fair, you did.
But then it changes every day, like you said, so it doesn't make any difference, really.
I suppose at this moment in time, it'd be Mother.
Right.
Definitely the most favourite. Least favourite? Can I just be one of those people that says, oh, you know, I love them all?
You could choose a few, perhaps. Or...
The least favourite are usually pretty much John's Beatles ranks for myself.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you know, Run for Your Life.
Oh, yeah. I chose It's Only Love.
It's Only Love.
Help. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad at all. It's I genuinely, I've said this on the show, I genuinely don't dislike much of his stuff. And it's not because, it's John, I have to love it all. It's just literally... You know, my taste, there's not too many I dislike. What do you think of the New York City album? Because that's the one that gets slammed most by Beatles podcasters and reviewers.
It's enjoyable when I take the time to listen to it, but it is an album that I generally don't tend to just pop on. A few of the tracks I really do like. I'm not a big fan of Yoko's work, so I think that kind of dampens the experience a little bit for me. I know that sounds, I love Yoko, I really do, but I'm not keen on a singing voice.
Yeah. I just kind of think with Double Fantasy as well, I think they should have just brought out 2 albums.
Me too, definitely.
I mean, of course, it's totally up to them, you know. I think in 72 when they brought out New York, I kind of bought it more, not literally bought it, but bought the idea of them because I think at that time their relationship was fully genuine. I think by 1980, my personal opinion, which as a listener you probably heard a few hundred times, is that... There was something slightly inauthentic about their relationship by 1980, but that's another story.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion on it all is if John had been around a few more years, I don't believe that John and Yoko would still be the same unit, which they weren't then.
Yeah. Another point we've made on the show is that although they were quite extraordinary people, and of course John Lennon had an extraordinary life, which wasn't always in his control. I mean, he couldn't control the Beatles' fame, but also, they were a married couple, and they probably fell into a thing that married couples fall into, that sort of, I'm not going to say convenience, but...
Oh, absolutely. No, it is convenience. Yeah, it is. Right. In my personal opinion, yeah. I mean, you do just fall into a pattern, and you don't want to walk the apple cart sometimes, so you just go along with it, You become numb to it all.
Yeah, I mean, with them in the sense of they didn't have to be massively involved in each other's lives. And I'm guilty of probably reading too much into this thing that John Lennon was kind of holed up in the Dakota and he's spent a lot of time in his room and Yoko was doing business. I think at that point they weren't so involved in each other's lives. I think in 1980, in the interviews he did, he kind of gave the impression that their relationship was similar to the way it had been. But I think they were, like I said, just fallen into this, dare I say it, conventional relationship, believe it or not. Conventional in John and Yoko's world, anyway.
Yeah, completely unconventional to the rest of us, but hey-ho. No, I do. I agree with you there.
Could you tell me about how you discovered Glass Onion, and are there any favourite episodes? I'm going to shower myself with praise now, but no, I'm joking. But how did you discover the podcast?
Well, you are fantastic, and I do enjoy listening to you every day. So thrilled to be doing this. Really nervous. But I discovered you at work. So quiet day at work, and I have to be careful what I say here because my boss is actually going to tune in. She's going to tune in. So hi, Vicky.
Right.
So I did a very quiet day at work, and at the current moment in time, we don't even have a music license. So I thought, I'm looking at some podcasts. I need some background noise, and I think, I wonder if there's a really good John Lennon podcast around. And with the first episode, I believe it was the Rod Davies episode.
Yeah. And
I was captivated straight away, and I haven't stopped listening to you since. My customers know your voice. They're well familiar. They often comment, I've got my boyfriend out the back of the shop, which is quite funny. But yeah, so that's how I discovered you. And I listened to a few others in between, I've tuned into a few others. I can't remember their names. But there's something about your podcast. I mean, it's the clarity. I like the calm feeling to it. It's not overly excited. Nice and relaxing, and your guests are fantastic too. I can't fault you, to be honest.
I mean, this whole sort of journey, and I have to credit social media as well, although I have issues with social media, but the way on Facebook, once you're in the family, so to speak, the people that you're friends with on Facebook, their friends will be all these kind of authors and things. And I just started contacting people. I thought, I'll just go for it. I'd accumulated so much knowledge, but I still have to read books and stuff for it.
Since becoming slightly older and becoming a mother, I've lost contact with a lot of my friends who share the same interests. And discovering your podcast, it's kind of helped me rediscover myself in a sense. Because John Lennon and the Beatles for me and my genuine interests lie here. And that's faded over the past few years, but it feels like it's slowly coming back to me, So listening to your podcast, it's like reliving a part of my past. Does that make any sense? I'm so sorry. I may sound like an absolute fool for you, but yeah. It really has helped, and it's nice to be able to have a conversation with someone about John Lennon without the eye roll and the kind of dismissive attitude about it, and it's just genuinely nice. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. When I was young, of the many career things I was thinking of doing, I always thought I wanted to be a radio DJ, but I was talking to someone on the show. We were saying it's instead of spending 10 years working your way up in a radio station, it's much easier to start a podcast. And, if it really took off, you could be speaking to millions of people, without having a boss or anyone telling you. Not that I'm making any money, but you know what I mean? It's that opportunity. So, do you want me to give a message to your boss, maybe?
Just tell her that I work really hard and...
Well, you've already said it.
I don't spend all of my day at the back of the shop listening to this podcast, I promise.
Okay. What's her name?
Vicky.
Okay, it's a message for Vicky. Stephanie's learning a lot from this show. It's not only about John Lennon, it's about life, and it's cheering her up. So, yeah.
And when I'm happy, I work harder.
There you go.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Are there any favourite episodes you can think of? Anything that stands out?
Recently, it's been the Robert Rosen. I really enjoyed that because, like I say, I remember reading that his book when I was very young, and I was a little bit put off by it because obviously it's taken from the diaries, but it's someone's interpretation of what they remember of the diaries. Is that correct?
Yeah. I asked him actually, I don't know if it was on mic or off mic, how much of it he could remember distinctly, and he said about 80%. So, he sort of said that it was, I don't know, he kind of added to the imagery himself. He's describing these very sort of vivid dreams that John Lennon put in his diary, but then he's putting his own spin on it, which, isn't so bad. I mean, that was an interesting book. I reread it before I talked to him.
Yeah, well, I started rereading it after listening to your podcast, and I still find it very difficult. There's a lot in the book that actually does ring true, and then there's a lot you think, well, that's definitely embellished. I'm not a massive fan of, is it Frederick Seaman?
Fred Seaman, yeah.
To me, I find the idea of working alongside of someone or working for someone and maybe taking advantage in a way for your own gain, I just don't find him to be the most reliable. So that book is kind of painted in a way for me.
At least Robert was able to confirm some parts of Fred's book, though. That was one good thing, because they were friends, and there's all that amazing stuff about they scored up weed for John Lennon and then smoked it in the station wagon. I mean, that must have been just mind-blowing. I think Robert took a long time to recover from that whole experience. I think it was just a bit much. I think he said the same about Fred as well. I think it just got to him because it was almost a 24-hour job. You've got this amazing access to these two incredible people, or certainly with incredible lives. But at the same time, you've got to be there. If you're asleep or something, you just got to wake up and go back to work. You're at their beck and call. So,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I envy his position, absolutely, but maybe not so much the job role itself. That book genuinely makes me think about John's position at that time. This megastar, maybe the most famous person in the world. He's John Lennon. He's sitting in the Dakota, isolated in New York, smoking weed, with no one around him really that he can really trust. I think it was on your podcast, and they said that the maids would steal from them, but they had so much hoarded that they wouldn't necessarily know immediately. People were taking constantly. That must have been a horrible situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think whichever version of the last 5 years you believe, and it doesn't even matter about certain details, but I think some things are clear, and one of them is that they would have to have been quite paranoid, just because of their situation. They'd have to be paranoid about, the people that are working for them. People could sell their autographs. They could just steal even something that he wouldn't miss. Obviously, if you stole one of his guitars, he'd miss it. But if you stole an object and said, I can verify this belongs to John Lennon, you could probably make a few grand selling it. So they'd have to be, justifiably paranoid. And then I think the thing in the Ray Coleman book was that he'd given up drugs by 72, which I think most people would agree that wasn't true. So he was smoking weed, and that's obviously going to add to it. And there's some quite comical stuff in Fred Seaman's book about John Lennon, the multimillionaire who can do anything he wants, is trying to find a moment to go back to his room and have a joint, without anyone bothering him. But he's got maids and Sean and, very interesting. All right. So obviously October the 9th, this is going to be going out just before October the 9th, I think, is the 80th birthday. John Lennon is obviously physically not here, and amazingly, it's 40 years, if you can believe that. What's his role in today's world? He's still present. I think, his songs are still present and his voice is still present, because you can go on to, YouTube or anywhere on the internet and listen to one of his interviews. So as far as you can see, what's his place in the world as of now?
In the time in which we live in at the moment, I can't help but feel that nothing is quite genuine. Nothing feels genuine. I feel like there's no truth, and there doesn't feel like there's much honesty around. I feel that at this moment in time, John Lennon speaks to a lot of people because of his absolute brute honesty and the realism there. He was a dreamer, but he was real. And I think a lot of people, as I said earlier about my origin story, you feel that from John. You feel it from his voice. You feel it from his words. Just watching an interview with John Lennon, it's that passion, it's that honesty. And the most important thing to me about John Lennon as a person, and why I admire him so much, is because in this day and age of celebrity, everyone is perfect. Everyone has to be perfect. It's Instagram filters, it's Snapchat filters, it's, you've got your PR people telling you what to say and what not to say. And with John Lennon, I admire the fact that he stood up and said, I'm not a nice person sometimes. I have my faults. But what I do is I recognise those faults, or I do my best to recognise those faults, and I work on them, and I try to better myself as a human being, as a person, and as a whole, make a better world for us and our children to live in. My partner's from Romania, and he doesn't know much about John Lennon. And he asked me, why this guy? Of everyone else, of all the other musicians, the artists, the authors, the television personalities, why this man? And that is exactly what I said to him. What I just said to you is, it's the realism. He stood up for us. He stood up for himself. And I feel like he was a champion of the underdog too, you know. He may not have been working class by birth, but he was a working class hero, because he was a hero of the working class people. When we look to him for truth, for honesty, you know, that's what will live on with John Lennon. My nephews and nieces, as I said to you earlier, you know, they're in their late teens, early 20s, and they've been discovering him from early teens, maybe, mostly due to myself and my passion for John. And he's so important to them. And I look at them now, and they speak to me about him. You know, they post on social media about him. They want to go to Liverpool, to go to Mendips, to walk inside of there and have that experience. How many other artists can you say that about? I mean, Paul, obviously, you know, to a certain extent. But John was different, and John was a truth seeker and speaker.
Yeah. Wow, that was amazing. What a great speech.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Well, it's from the heart. Like I said to you earlier, you know, everything that's from the heart is valid. So that's great.
As long as you don't think I sound like an absolute idiot.
No, you sound great. Yeah, for me, I think one of the unfortunate things with social media, I think, is that I kind of know this from, I can't remember if it's a guest or just someone was talking to me about his position in that a lot of people are looking to stuff that he did wrong in his life, like his treatment of Julian and the possibility that he might have struck some women, Cynthia.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I mean, as I said, I'm listening to Philip Norman's John Lennon at the moment. And the audacity of the man to start divorce proceedings against Cynthia for adultery. You know, it's shocking. I mean, I actually sat, and I won't swear, but I thought, you absolute...
So-and-so.
Yeah. But on the same note, and on a different note, I should say, he understood that later on in life. It may have taken him a while, but he did. And he did try to make amends to what he thought was the best of his ability, maybe. He hurt people, and he was sorry. He said he was sorry, and he tried to learn from his mistakes. He did try and reconcile with Julian, but he was human, you know? I mean, we can look and say, oh, this is John Lennon. You see his picture on the wall as this icon, but he was human. He's a human being. He's a man. And we know, you know, you guys, you can be quite harsh sometimes, can't you?
Yeah. The thing about working class, that's interesting, because people always point to the fact that he lived in Wilton, which is a very nice sort of suburban area of Liverpool.
Beautiful area, yeah.
Yeah, and they definitely grew up from a certain time as, I would say, lower middle class. I don't think it's fully middle class, but in other countries, they don't have a class system that's as complicated as ours. That's one of the things. You know, we've got lower working class, sort of, some people like to call themselves upper working class in that they grew up working class, but they're sort of upwardly mobile. Then you got lower middle class, upper middle class, etc. Anyway, in France many years ago, they had proletariat and bourgeoisie. So the working class is like most people. I think if you bracket it in that way, then he's definitely working class. And the first house he lived in, which was Newcastle Road, is definitely a 2 up and 2 down, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
Perhaps in other countries, they don't think so much of working and middle class. It's more the ordinary man, let's say.
Absolutely.
You know? And he had an interesting upbringing, because it wasn't that dissimilar from my own. I mean, when I was getting into John Lennon, when I saw a picture of his house and I saw that he had a little room just above the front door, I was like, oh, that's amazing, because in the house I grew up in until I was 9, I had a little bedroom just above the front door, and I was a dreamer, and I used to stare out the window wondering how I could, you know, make my way in the world. I'm still wondering that now, by the way. But
Me too, every day.
Yeah.
Have you visited Mendips? You have done the National Trust tour, is that right?
Oh, God, yeah. About 4 times, I think.
On the note of John's 80th birthday, I mean, it seems 5 minutes ago since his 70th.
Yeah.
And I remember asking my father, my poor father, seriously, I bought a red rose, a single red rose, and I said to my dad, please take me to Mendips. I just need to go to Mendips. I need to go to Liverpool. And Bless him. He drove me all the way to Liverpool to put single red rose on the garden. Colin Hall was there at the time, and he knew me from doing many, many tours. And I put single red rose on the garden of Mendes. And I remember standing there for a few seconds, and there were so many people there, not doing the tour, just generally people of Liverpool that had gone to Mendes that day to stand outside to silently wish him a happy birthday, to remember him for a few minutes. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful day.
And how many times have you done that tour?
Too many
to count, yeah.
Yeah, Colin used to send me free tickets in the end. He'd just post them to me, like, just, those are for you, just come whenever you like. I try and do it at least like 4 or 5 times a year.
Oh, wow. Baby. Yeah, I always just find, like I say, going to his room, his little bedroom, because it reminds me of my little bedroom when I was a kid. Quite amazing. And just thinking that the others were in that room and he had a little record player and they would have been, you know, playing Elvis records and trying to write down the lyrics and work out the chords. It's just, still don't quite understand the screaming thing, as I think I said on my last show. But
I've never understood that. To be fair, the only time I think I shed a tear at a concert was the first time I saw The Who. But that was a silent tear, you know. I can't imagine going in for all the screaming. That's insane.
But that room and that house, I think it's the fact they've sort of mocked the house up to look, well, not even mocked it really. It's a lot of genuine, not exactly antiques, but 50s cups and saucers and plates and things like that. And
I love Aunt Mimi's bedroom. I could sit there underneath that dressing table looking out of that window all day. I think it is such a calming room. That, in fact, is my favourite room in the whole house. I think you're looking up the road, you know. I mean, you've got the thought of Julia there, bless her. As a sister and as an aunt, you're taking care of this young man, this special young man. Let's be honest, you always knew he was special. And to look out of that bedroom window and know that your sister died there, you've got her son, and everything that came to be over the years, I feel with the presence in that room. That sounds ridiculous, but I do. There's a lovely presence in that bedroom.
No, that's fair enough. My only criticism of that tour is that it's a little bit brief. I think if they could extend it, you know, the free time you have to look around before they sort of shunt you out. I think they could increase that by 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, I just sort of stayed in his room, and because I meditate as well, and I just sort of meditated for a minute. I think I said for a joke, very John Lennon, if you've got any songs, you know, you want to give me, feel free to beam them down. But I haven't got anything yet. But yeah.
I actually discovered Hancock's Half Hour from that house. In the day room, they got the radio, and there was an episode of Hancock's Half Hour, and Colin got on with the tour. He let me have free time as soon as we went in there, and I sat on the chair and listened to an episode of Hancock's Half Hour. And I'm sure the Goon Show as well once was playing in there. The atmosphere, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done with those tours, I mean, Paul's obviously as well. You know, when Paul went into his, I think I talked about this on the last podcast, didn't I? That carpool karaoke, seeing him go into that house after 54 years was pretty amazing. And you could see, I know with Paul, it's very difficult because he's got this sort of persona that he goes into when he's on camera. But you could see that, you know, it was a bit weird for him, and he kind of went, woo, like that at the end of it. You know, that must have been so strange, because you're just walking back. When you think of everything that he has done since, you know, 64 when he moved out, I mean, it's pretty special. When
I saw that, I thought of his mother's signature on the wall, because they have the only signature from Mary McCartney, which is the council tenancy agreement in the back room. Yeah, I mean, how special is that?
It's amazing, isn't it? And brilliant idea they had of putting Mike's photos framed at the point in the room where they were taken. And,
love it, yeah.
I think that John and Paul photo of them practicing, I saw her standing there with the exercise book.
With John with his glasses on, is that right?
Yeah, John with his glasses. Yeah. And you can see a little bit of the fireplace as well, so you know that it was at that point.
Yeah.
I think the one Beatles mystery, there's still a few, but the one that nobody is probably ever going to solve, even Mark Lewison, is where those 1960 recordings were done. You know, the ones with the early version of I'll Follow the Sun and One After 909. Because they say Fourth Lynn Road, but I don't think it's... Because when I listen to those, it sounds very cavernous, like they're in quite a big room. So I'm inclined to think they may have done it either at Gambier Terrace or perhaps in the art college, because art colleges tend to have big rooms with high ceilings, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, most probably.
Doesn't sound like Fourth Lynn Road just because it sounds, I say, a bit cavernous. But, you know, if I ever meet Paul, I would like to say, oh, can you, try and rack your brains and work out where they were done? Because we don't even know who's on them either. I mean, some people say Mike McCartney's sort of whacking a suitcase or whacking the table or something to provide some percussion. And some people say George is doing the guitar. I think Mark Lewison said George may have been at work, because George works as an apprentice electrician for a while. So, I mean, that's 60 years now. I mean, there's still a few mysteries, and Mark's doing his best. Have you read Tune In?
No, I haven't. Sorry, let you down.
Yeah, sorry, Mark, if you're listening.
Sorry, Mark.
But no, I mean, that's the real journey. It took me about 3 months because I just went slowly, day by day. You go to Liverpool and it's... Because I grew up in the 80s thinking of Liverpool as the football team.
Yeah.
And then I discovered that all this stuff had happened in the 60s and the 50s before I was even born. And then I went back and now I associate Liverpool with the Beatles. But, yeah.
It's a wonderful place. I remember having a night at the Cavern and I came out at the Cavern about midnight maybe. And Matthew Street was lined with hen parties and stag parties. And these children, I mean, looking back now, they were children. They were about 17 years old. And there was 4 of them. One was using a broken acoustic guitar as a drum. The other was singing and the other was playing guitar. And they were playing Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. And everyone congregated around them. I mean, the whole street was singing along and they were fantastic. And then you'd walk out of Matthew Street, you'd turn the corner and there'd be another band there. And it just felt like so alive. It's so vibrant, It's a great place to be.
I think also regardless of the money that Paul's made or parts of John Lennon's life that people disagree on, I think the one thing I agree on that the Beatles were certainly earthy. They were kind of rough and ready and they didn't have any money to begin with. And I think the story is just, in a way, it's a classic story. In a way, it's been overblown and perhaps it was more ordinary than we think. But I think there's certain things you can't deny in that there's something organic about it. They came from 3 chords and battered guitars and battered amps. And, when they did auditions, they often couldn't use their own equipment because it was too bad. And to borrow equipment and borrow drummers. And that's the thing, Liverpool is getting gentrified slowly but surely, like most places. But there's still little bits. I always find the area around Gambier Terrace at Liverpool 8, isn't it? I still found that's definitely got an atmosphere about it. That,
it has.
Probably won't die.
My nephew actually lives there at the moment, and he said it feels it's genuine Liverpool, he said.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm going to have to reluctantly draw this to a close. Is there any closing message you would like to give the world? No pressure.
Oh, no, thank you. Oh, dear. Oh, Anthony.
Keep listening to Glass Onion. That's what I was fishing for.
I will say that. So, just keep listening to Glass Onion. There's always more to explore. The story's never ending. John may not be with us anymore, but his story will live on forever. And I'm sure there's always going to be a few twists and turns along the way. So, keep tuned.
Lovely. Thank you very much. All right, this has been great. Just stay on the line. We'll just do the official goodbye now. And I'll talk to you for a few minutes afterwards. But, thanks very much and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
All right, all the best. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, third and final guest today is David Rainey. How are you today, my friend?
Fine, thank you, Anthony. And you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Brilliant.
Been fun doing this.
I'm sure it has, yeah.
Getting people on who aren't plugging a book or anything.
Yeah, I've certainly nothing to plug, that's for sure.
Okay. Now, for our overseas listeners, can you tell us where your exotic accent comes from?
It comes from the west of England.
Okay.
Bristol, to be exact.
Right. Is Bristol on the way to Wales? Not really. No.
Not really, no.
My knowledge of geography of places like Asia and South America is much better than what's actually...
Yeah, it's difficult to describe where I am. If you look at the map, where Wales is, we're across the channel, the watery bit.
Yeah. Not a million miles from Wales.
Not a million miles, no.
Okay. So, we went through a few things by email, so we'll go through this now. I generally start by asking the guests their John Lennon / Beatles origin story. So can we go with that? Any books, songs, albums?
Yeah, well, what I'll do, I'll try and keep it as brief as I can.
Okay.
The first song that kicked it all off was She Loves You. I was born on Christmas Eve, 59. So by the time She Loves You came out, I was about 3.5, just over.
Right.
And for some reason, even at that age, She Loves You connected with me straight away.
Mm.
What I used to do is get mum's saucepans and start banging spoons on them, a la Ringo Starr. So started in that way, typical 3.5-year-old.
Well, you're a bit early for love, so I imagine it was the music, was it? Just the energy, I suppose.
Oh, it was the music, yeah.
Yeah.
It was the song. I think it might have been the yeah, yeah, yeah refrain, I don't know. But it was She Loves You that kicked it all off. And then I have a dim recollection of Help and then Yellow Submarine the following year. And then that was it then until 1973 with Give Me Love, Give Me Peace on Earth.
Oh, yeah. Living in the Material World.
Album. Yeah, George's single. So when that dropped out the top 30, I paid about 20p for it in Debenhams in their bargain bin.
Oh, those were the days.
That's right.
20p.
Yeah. So that would be the end of June, beginning of July. And I've just become aware of the Red album.
Oh, that was 73, wasn't it? The Red and Blue.
That's right. Yeah. So a lot of people of my generation, that was the first two albums, the Red and the Blue one.
Yeah.
Saved up my pocket money. I think it was $3.99. And I remember coming home, showing Dad what I'd bought, and he said, "What do you want that old music for?"
It's already passé.
Yeah, and it was only 3 years after they split up.
Absolutely, yeah.
So basically then it was the Blue album and Abbey Road on cassette at Christmas, and it went on from there.
Yeah, I did a show about 1972 with Mick Ord, and he was saying the same thing. They were almost out of fashion already, which is just amazing, but hard to stay current, isn't it? I mean, I think some bands, if you try to stay current too deliberately, then it comes off as a deliberate attempt to stay young, you know?
Yeah, because I can remember when I was in the sixth form, that would be 76 through 77. That was just as punk was coming in.
Yeah.
And basically it was three bands. I remember ELO, ABBA and Wings were the three bands in the sixth form that everyone was talking about. So I was the only sort of Beatle fan at the time. Like you say, they were a bit passé. And although by that time there was a slight boost because the singles were re-promoted.
Oh, of course they were. Yeah, 76, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And rock and roll music came out.
That's right, yeah.
So there was a slight upturn then, but then it died away after that.
Yeah, because there was a sort of downturn in interest, probably more in England than America, I would guess, and from talking to people who've been on the show. But they're always kind of there. There's always some release or other coming out, you know, because 77 was the Star Club.
And the Hollywood Bowl.
Bowl, yeah. And there must have been a few people around when... I know the Star Club tapes didn't sound too good when they first came out. They sound pretty good now, but I'm surprised there weren't more people saying, oh, well, the early Beatles does sound a bit like punk. I mean, in a parallel world where that album was better received, the Star Club one, that could have been almost some sort of compliment to the punk scene.
Yeah. I did read a couple of reports in the music press at the time.
Right.
It was compared to punk. Sort of read a couple of things in the NME or Sound or Melody Maker.
Yeah. And you apparently went to the first Beatles Fest, is that right? 77?
I did, yeah. Well, the first one in Liverpool. Because there was the first one was in Norwich in 76. And I went to the one after that at the Ali Palais, December that year.
But the first Beatles convention in England was in Norwich?
That was the first one, yeah. So I went to the second one. And then Alan Williams and Bob Willer put the one on in Liverpool at a club called Mr. Pickwick's.
Right.
That was in the October. That was over his birthday weekend. So we're coming up to a little anniversary for that as well. That was great. I met Lord Woodbine.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Woodard, Clive Epstein was there.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I didn't take a camera.
How many people would have been there?
There wouldn't have been very many. 100 perhaps. Probably people that went there. No, it was more than that, but it wasn't a lot.
Wow, fantastic.
Because Mark Lewisham was there. Richard Buskin went, I know that.
Yeah, because all these people involved would have been still young and, you know, you're only 15 years removed.
That's right.
Started.
Yeah, we're only talking 10 years after Pepper.
Yeah.
So everyone was still around, yeah. Went to the Casbah Club and Mona was there, so...
at the Casbah, yeah. They're still doing it,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. And since you were around at the time, I mean, I don't want to harp on John Lennon's untimely end because I think we've covered that a lot on the show. But when he came back in 1980, can you remember what your reaction was or the reaction in England Were people excited? Was he already considered a bit over the hill? What would you say about that?
Well, I was excited.
Right.
I just couldn't believe that after 5 years he was coming back.
Yeah.
Now, as for the UK, I can't remember. Obviously, the music press were very interested, but I'm not sure about the general public.
I've made the point on the show that neither the single Just Like Starting Over or the album, neither of them shot to the top of the charts. I think one of them got to number 8, one of them got to number 12.
That's right, yeah.
But I don't know if you're aware, but Ken Womack has a new book coming out. Looks like it's already out in America, I think. But
it is out there. Yeah,
he's kindly sending me a PDF. You just have to have friends in the right places.
That's right.
And I think from an interview Ken did, I think he was saying that it hadn't really been out very long before, obviously, the awful events happened. So it could have got to the top. So I don't know about that, but I would just
it wouldn't have done because it was on its way down by the time, as far as I can remember, before December the 8th came along.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, obviously, it went straight back up to number 1 single and album, and everything else came in as well.
Yeah. It's always that strange thing, isn't it? I've never quite understood why when someone dies, people have to start immediately buying up all their stuff. I mean, I totally understand with Double Fantasy because it was current, it was there, and it's like a tribute almost.
Yeah, I've never understood it myself. Because someone could die next week and someone would go out and buy their album or a album, but they wouldn't do it today.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be cynical, but nowadays people would probably download all their stuff rather than buy it.
Yeah, well, I'm still a physical man, so I would go out and buy it.
Yeah, I do still buy CDs and stuff occasionally, and occasionally vinyl as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite and least favourite John Lennon song or album or both? You can either choose Beatles era or solo. Totally up to you.
Unfortunately, I'm not one of these because I like everything.
All right. Yeah.
And I'm one of those. I think you've mentioned that my sort of person before. There's nothing really I don't like, so I would find it difficult.
I mean, I'm a bit like that, to be honest. But,
obviously, I would think something is better than the other, but I couldn't say a worse. Favourites were just so many. I've jotted down a couple, but I went solo because it's difficult enough going Beatles and solo. So I just things like Nobody Told Me.
Oh yeah, great.
Watching the Wheels, God, any take of God, any version of that.
Yeah.
And I think, well, we come on to my favourite album in it, but the single is Mind Games. That's always up there.
It's had on the new remix, hasn't it?
That's right.
That's another story.
Yeah.
No, interesting. Judging from the fact you chose Nobody Told Me, which obviously wasn't released in his lifetime, but was recorded along with Double Fantasy, and you chose Watching the Wheels, so presumably you think his 1980 recordings were quite promising.
I do, yeah. I love them. When I first heard Double Fantasy, I was just knocked out. And Yoko's, in fairness, I think Yoko blossomed on that album as well.
Yeah.
Did you like her stuff on there?
What songs were on there? I mean, I liked Kiss Kiss Kiss. I mean, I really liked Walking on Thin Ice, although I don't think that was on the album, was it? But that came out as a single.
Moving On was on there.
I'm Moving On, yeah. You're My Angel. There's something about her delivery that I do like. It's going to sound like incredibly patronizing, but in small doses. But, that's true.
Yeah.
It's not a diss because a lot of people would say the same thing about Frank Zappa. I mean, if you listen, and Frank Zappa, for me, took a lot of work to get into. It wasn't easy.
I know nothing about Frank Zappa.
Right. It's one of those things that's ultimately it's worth it. It's like I'm just reading Moby Dick at the moment. And it's bloody hard work. But when you get to the end of it, you get like a real buzz from it. It's like, oh, this was all worth it. And Zappa's a bit like that. It took me months and months to get into him. But, people would say about Frank Zappa that perhaps in small doses as well, So, I mean, I'm a bigger fan of Sometime in New York City than a lot of people. She has a very sort of childlike delivery, which I kind of warm to. Because John Lennon occasionally sounds like a child, I mean, obviously when he sang My Mummy's Dead and he put the effect on his voice, he sounded like a wounded child. So I don't know if that was one of the things that they bonded with, but when their 2 Plastic Ono Band albums came out, I don't know if it was on the vinyl, maybe on the back cover, they had a child photo of the 2 of them. Remember that?
That's right.
Would that be on the back of the vinyl?
On the back of the vinyl, yeah.
Yeah.
The New York City album, I like the live jam as well. It's got my favourite version of Cold Turkey on there from the Lyceum in '69.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Those people on it, yeah.
yeah. And well, Baby Please Don't Go from the Fillmore's.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
It's worth having the album just for the live jam. I know a lot of people write it off, don't they?
Yeah. What about, do you like Live Peace in Toronto?
Yeah.
I first saw that when I was about 14. My sort of Beatles Lennon initial phase was about the age of 13 or 14 to about 16 or 17, just full immersion. And I remember watching Live Peace in Toronto, and he just looked scary, you know, with his...
He does, that's right. I know what you mean.
And I could tell even, you know, at 13 or 14, you know, there's something wrong with him in the sense of he looks like really out of it. And there's a sort of jerky kind of intensity about that performance. But in recent years, they've really cleaned up that recording, and it actually sounds really good now.
Yeah, I haven't watched the video for quite a long time after having had a look at it. When I started buying the album, sort of catching up after 73, you could still get all this stuff. It was still on catalogue. So I could still go on HMV in 73 and 74 and pick all this up, like Life of the Lions, Live Peace in Toronto, Wonderwall Music, Electronic Sound. It was still readily available. That's when I first got it. It was about 74.
But during the 60s, I mean, other than you said about She Loves You, were you interested in the Beatles releases as they came out in the 60s?
No, I said I can vaguely remember Help being out and then Yellow Submarine, but apart from She Loves You, that was it.
The songs or the films?
Oh, the songs.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Did you go back to the old Beatles albums then?
Yeah, but I was buying it all together. So I didn't buy the Beatles albums first and then progress to the solo. I was just getting them as I saw them.
Yeah.
If I saw Rubber Soul, I would get it. But then again, if I saw Material, I'd get it as well.
So do you think that maybe the best of the solo stuff does stack up with Beatles?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Definitely.
And just slightly off topic, what would be your favourite Paul solo record, including Wings?
Oh, dear. Well, off the top of my head, I'll go for Chaos and Creation.
Oh, right, yeah. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Good photo as well on the front cover.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike's, yeah.
Yeah, I used to have that Remember book, Mike McCartney's photos from 50s.
That's right.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And it smelled like an old book, the copy I got as well. That sort of slightly musty kind of smell about it, yeah.
Sounds like a charity shop purchase.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Sale or something. All right. Could you tell me when you discovered my podcast, Glass Onion? And if there's any favourite episodes, can you keep them to yourself, please? The least favourite. No, just tell me, your experience of the podcast.
Yeah, I first heard of it through Kit O'Toole.
Oh, right.
On Talk More Talk, on the video cast that she does with Ken. Well, it was Ken, I think it was Ken Womack was on there then.
Yeah, he's very busy, so they got somebody else.
That's right. Joe Mayo does it now. And she said at the end, when they were talking about what was coming up, that she was appearing on a podcast called Glass Onion on John Lennon. So that's the first I heard of it. I think I left it a couple of weeks before I listened to the first one. And it was actually Kit's 2 episodes that I heard first.
Yeah, we did 1975 to 80, didn't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first two I listened to. And then it went on for, catching up with what I'd missed and then just taking it as it came.
Any favourite episodes?
Favourite episodes? I always seem to do it in top 5s. So I think you will know what number 1 is, but I've gone Riding So High at 5.
Okay.
Both episodes. Number 4, I've gone The Best Songs with Jason Barnard. I listened to that all in one go. So that was 2 hours, wasn't it, that one?
Yeah, that was the one that kind of made the audio clips a big part of the show.
Yeah.
I think I put something like 15 audio clips into that. It becomes a little bit addictive when you find... I've got a huge audio archive and there's so many clips on online and stuff. So that was a bit of a breakthrough, that one, yeah.
Then number 3, I put David Bedford.
That was in the Jacaranda?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Number 2 was Ken McNabb.
Oh, yeah.
And then have a guess at number 1.
Revolution 9.
That's it. You've got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed all of them, but I thought I'd just do a little top 5. I could have put 2 or 3 others in there, really.
Yeah, I mean, I always say my favourites. Revolution 9 was kind of special because I was in Liverpool at the end of last year. There was that sort of pre-Christmas flavour, even though the episode's got nothing to do with Christmas, obviously.
Yeah.
And I'd always wanted to look at Revolution 9 because it had become, at some point, it became quite a big part of my John Lennon fandom, let's say, because it does have layers and depths to it. And I also did that show over 5 or 6 nights, which I don't normally do. But it had so many sort of bits to it, and I wasn't sure I was going to do it. And I was also working late at night as well. One night, I think I finished at 2 o'clock in the morning. And because it's so spooky anyway, that really was like, oh, it was a bit spooky. And I think that was the point where I personalized a bit more.
Mm.
Do you like Revolution 9? Or did you like
it?
Episode?
Yeah, I did. Especially under headphones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Full volume under headphones, yeah.
Yeah. Herbal jazz cigarette, optional. No, no pressure on the listener. But
I've never tried a jazz cigarette.
Oh, haven't you?
No. I tried a cigarette when I was about 9. Didn't like it. I've never had anything since.
9? Oh, a normal cigarette.
Yeah.
One of the other things is when I was at when I was at sixth form college, I studied sociology, and I did a project on the counterculture.
Mm.
And when I read about 68, you know, how we'd gone from flower power, which I think was a bit manufactured in hindsight. You know, you could read a lot of books talking about that period and they'll say that. It was definitely something genuine in it, but I think it was a bit overblown or whatever I'm trying to say. But then the following year, it seemed to all change, and you had these 2 horrible deaths, Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, all these riots and protests. And I think it was actually George Martin, an interview with George Martin, where he said, you know, you could actually lie on the floor or however you want to do it with your headphones on, listening to the stereo version of Revolution 9 and hear the chaos in your ears, you know?
Mm.
And that's what I was trying to convey in that episode, you know?
Yeah, because that little piece I wrote and I sent to you, I think I put that in there. That came across in the episode.
Did I read that out on the
You
next
did,
episode?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm pleased I did, yeah. I get lots of messages from all around the world, which is one of the absolutely loveliest things about doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And, I try to read as many out as I can. So I'm pleased I did that. All right. So obviously we're coming up to John Lennon's 80th birthday. As I was saying, as I've said to my other guests, even though physically he's not been around for 40 years, you know, without going into cliches about his spirit guiding us and all that kind of thing, the fact that his work is still featured in films and obviously now online, you know, you'll hear people posting his music on social media, just left, right and center. What do you see as John Lennon's significance in the world as of, you know, September or October 2020?
Well, he'll always be relevant as long as people listen to music.
Mm.
And certainly as long as there's conflict in the world, people will always think give peace a chance and imagine, won't they, with things like that. Even with the pandemic, there's been a few videos that these celebrities have put together. So in that respect, he'll always be relevant. Because that's the good thing about the album is coming out in a couple of weeks. Give Me Some Truth, you know, the greatest hits thing that they put together.
Yeah.
I know that we've had plenty before, but at least if it introduces just half a dozen people to his music, then that's worthwhile. So I'm sure it will.
Do you listen to When They Was Fab?
I have done, but not regularly.
Okay. I just appeared on there talking about John Lennon compilations.
Right.
And, I might be out by the time this one comes out, probably around the same time. I'm just going to be honest with you and say that we were quite cynical about the number of compilations.
Yeah.
But I think I did make the point towards the end, the point that you just made, that someone who's never owned a John Lennon compilation, there's a case for saying that it's better that they own, you know, the best possible version of it. And, you know, I'm not someone who hears lots of differences in remasters and remixes, but I think the elevation of bass and drums, you know, on Beatles recordings, for example, if you listen to those isolated ones, it's really nice to be able to hear the bass and the drums properly.
Oh yeah, they're wonderful there.
Because they were always the victims in the 60s, weren't they? You know, I never quite understood this, but they were worried about the stylus jumping on the record player if there was too much bass. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. That's what all the remasters have done, is certainly bring Ringo's drums up to the front.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think they've said that in every one that's come out. One of the main things they say is that Ringo's drums are much more forward now.
Mm. Have you heard the Double Fantasy stripped version?
I have, yeah.
Do you prefer that to the official one, or do you like the one that was released?
I like them both as much.
Right. Yeah. I just thought that stripped down one was quite... My ear pricked up a bit when I heard that.
Yeah.
In terms of its significance, I think the song "Give Me Some Truth" will always be significant because having sort of studied politics, and I watched every episode of Yes Minister religiously, and even wrote a blog post about that show. People will always say, oh, we need Give Me Some Truth more than at any point in history. But people kind of always say the same thing, whatever point of history we're at. So
we certainly need it now, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, the point that Yes Minister made is that it's almost not even possible for a politician to come into the political system and tell the truth. So I think that song will always be relevant. And I mean, I always loved Happy Christmas. I know it's a bit of a rip-off of a song called Stew Ball, but, you know.
Yeah, I know it is, but I've not heard that.
It's the tune, really. But if you think of the folk tradition, in the folk tradition before we were obsessed with intellectual property, melodies were up for grabs. And as long as you put your own stamp and your own words on it, and the lyrics of Happy Christmas, War is Over has got nothing to do with Stew Ball. So I always loved that song. And I love the refrain, War is over if you want it.
Yeah.
I think that statement, as much as anything else he ever said, is relevant, saying that it is to some extent in our hands. Now, the problem with that is saying, there's millions and millions of us or billions of us on the planet who don't want war. It's not so easy to say, you all need to get together. So
that's right.
Another thing he said, that he never said, I've got the answer, but I've got plenty of suggestions of how you can do this. War is over if you want it,
Yeah, it's the whole peace campaign, wasn't it? Posters in various cities. And
that's right. Yeah. And I mean, that was fascinating, as we said when we reviewed one show or other, when we were reviewing his politics. We said that the bed-in was an amazing event because he was using the establishment media to talk against the establishment,
Couldn't see it, could they?
No, that's the thing. They call it now the mainstream media. Good to know that there's an alternative to that. But he was basically using the mainstream media to attack the establishment. So he always had good ideas. I think, have you heard of Dan Richter?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on the show and he more or less lived with John Yoko for 2 years. And he said the one thing about John Lennon was that his ideas generator just never stopped.
No.
And he even said that's one of the reasons, smoked a bit of weed or whatever, was to calm himself down because his head was just so full of, song ideas and ideas for the world and literary ideas and all sorts.
Yeah, I can't imagine him ever stopping.
No.
There would always be something going on.
Yeah, I think regardless of what he was doing at the Dakota in those last 5 years, I'm sure, he was still pouring out his thoughts in one form or another, for sure.
Oh, yeah, I think he would have been, even though he tried to say otherwise.
Yeah, one version he's baking bread, the other version he's sort of holed up in his room as a prisoner.
That's right, yeah, with the tellur in the background,
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to say? Can I give you the final word? Because basically this episode of the podcast has been 3 fans of the show, and I chose the 3 people who'd given me the most feedback in the past and encouraged me with my podcast. So,
I enjoy the show, and it's an honour to be on it.
Oh, thank you.
I was quite surprised to get the message in the first place, but it's been a joy.
All right. Have you ever done anything like this?
Never.
Oh,
so it probably shows.
No, it's fine. One of the things was to give some listeners to the show a chance to be on the podcast, basically.
Yeah.
And as I said to Stephanie, who's the second guest, I said, anything you say is valid. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad answer to anything. Because if you're just talking honestly about what you feel about something, then it's all valid.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Editing takes care of the rest of it. So.
Yeah, I might come out sounding all right in the end.
Yeah, with that great accent. Unmistakable. Are there any topics you'd like to see covered in the future?
I don't think so, because I think what you come up with is good enough, really, Anthony. You'll cover a broad aspect of his life and career, so there's nothing I can suggest at this moment.
I did actually record with Ken Womack in August, but I wasn't very happy with the recording, the audio level was wrong, so my voice was distorted, but I wasn't happy anyway, which was my fault, not Ken's fault. When his book's actually out, he's going to be on the show. Have a very, very long, it's going to be a 3-parter about John Lennon and Elvis coming out, which is already recorded.
Right.
And we're good till the end of the year. I hate to keep saying the same thing, but I keep waiting to run out of material, but I'm just about,
I don't think you ever will.
Probably will eventually, just because you're talking about one person who unfortunately who had a very short adult life, relatively speaking.
Yeah, but there's so many aspects to him, isn't there, that I think it keep you busy for a little while, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. And just to say thank you very much for doing this and keep listening.
I will, Anthony. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yep. Thanks a lot and good luck in the future.
Thank you, and you.
Bye.
Bye.
So there you have it, friends. That was episode 53 and the listeners have spoken. So I hope the 3 participants, if they're listening back to this, found that okay. It wasn't too painful to listen to. I thought it went pretty well. We got into some interesting stuff beyond the bullet points, if that doesn't sound too clinical, that we agreed in advance. So yeah, very good. So before I go, just a couple of things. So the next show is another one to coincide with John Lennon's 80th birthday. And we're going to be ranking the albums from worst to best. Now, I think I did mention this before, but the twist is that they're going to include Beatles albums in terms of John Lennon's contribution to them. So really opened up a can of worms. But we had fun, and I had 2 very good, let's say, friends of the show, former guests, to help me out with that, and that was Ken McNabb and Kit O'Toole. So that'll be out fairly soon. Won't quite make it for John Lennon's birthday, because this one's gone out on the 7th. But on that subject, I did watch the programmes at the weekend, or watch and listen, I should say. So there was one on Sky Arts called John Lennon's Last Weekend, and I wasn't hugely impressed, to be honest. I mean, the majority of it was actually just pretty much a retrospective of his solo career and solo life, or even going back to the Beatles as well. And it was kind of all hung on this Andy Peebles interview, which he gave on the 6th of December, a couple of days before he died. You know, it was quite clever to do this because this is really the official version that's being pushed, and I'll come on to the radio show in a second. You know, and this is a perfect interview for that, because John Lennon was on form on that day, and, you know, there was an atmosphere of John Lennon's deliriously happy, very, very happy with Yoko, very, very happy with life, and I still contend from the evidence of studying it this year that wasn't quite the case. But anyway, you know, it's, you know, we knew we weren't going to get anything too controversial, and, you know, if the public wants that view, that's fine. I'm also reading Ken Womack's book, just about finishing it, in fact, and I'm going to be talking to him on Saturday. His book is more about John Lennon rediscovering his muse, so it has that sort of narrative, which is great, you know. So we're going to be talking mostly about that, but, you know, I might broach the subject of, you know, this sort of cosy version of John Lennon and his story. And, of course, going back to the Peebles interview, it's got that added poignancy because it was 2 days before the awful event. And that documentary, they didn't have any, it didn't seem like they had any music license, so it was all a little bit kind of low budget as well, and just seemed another excuse, more or less, to trot out the John Lennon story. And then the radio show, I mean, it was genuinely moving to hear Sean talking to Julian, apparently for the first time on tape anyway, and having their shared experiences of being John Lennon's son. And of course, they both had very, very difficult lives. Julian, we know all about the parental neglect, and then sort of stuff that's continued through his life. I mean, he said something in another interview. He said he very rarely laughs because at one point where he was visiting his father, I think it was at Tittenhurst, he had a really annoying laugh, Julian did. And his father would absolutely just tell him in no uncertain terms to stop doing that laugh and how annoying it was. And Julian said that since then, you know, like I say, he doesn't laugh much. Sean, of course, I always find myself forgetting that, you know, Sean Lennon, despite having apparently a pretty wonderful first 5 years of life with, I'm going to say, a doting father, I think the truth is that he was doting for a certain amount of time of the day, and for the rest of the day he was kind of holed up in his bedroom. And Ken Womack mentioned this as well. Ken did find a good middle ground between Coleman and Goldman, and I'm sure I'll ask him about that. But with Sean, you know, we have to remember that after those 5 years he lost his father, and that hasn't really lost its power. I mean, he's not going to forget that, obviously, and that's marked his life. Someone made the point that neither Sean and Julian have had children, and, you know, there may be other reasons for that, but perhaps, you know, they are wary of fatherhood themselves. Who knows? Elton John was on that one, and again, nothing really new, but fine, you know. It was a worthy Radio 2 programme for John Lennon's birthday. They weren't really looking to dish dirt, and we don't necessarily need dirt to be dished on his birthday. You know, we can read about it if we want to. Fred Seaman and Goldman, and we can decide whether we think it's true or not. But I had to laugh because Sean presumably hasn't done much interviewing or any interviewing. But I don't know if it was the editing or him himself, but when he was talking to Paul McCartney, he was sort of teeing up the old stories. Apparently you and my dad had some songs that hadn't been recorded, and everyone who knows Paul McCartney and his interviews and all the old stories knew that, he was going to talk about Just Fun. But cleverly he embellished it by playing it on the guitar as well. So it's the old stories and occasionally with a little bit extra added. But, many podcasts, including mine, joke about Paul talking about the Beatles. And this is another new interview, but really, he's going to say something like, John was a great songwriter, and I was left-handed and he was right-handed, so it was like looking in a mirror, But he was a great guy, he had this tough exterior, but when you got to know him, you knew that was just insecurity, to do with his family and etc. He's sounding more and more like Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know if he is in reality or it's just my impression, but like I say, Paul does add a few nuggets to these interviews, just sort of slipped in with the well-worn stories. And, he was saying that we're all insecure. That was a nice thing he said, which is undoubtedly true, that we all have insecurities, not just John Lennon or Paul McCartney or whoever. So, there's still value in these things. But I was a tiny bit disappointed by those programs. Anyways, so... Well, at least Sean didn't ask him about the inspiration for Helter Skelter, or who doesn't cringe when you hear someone like, Stephen Colbert earlier this year saying, so Paul, I heard that you dreamed yesterday. You got to laugh, really, haven't you? Finally, before I go, I did a guest appearance on a podcast called Under the Covers with a young man called John from Ohio. That was a lot of fun. That'll be out presumably in a couple of weeks. And just want to recommend his show, Under the Covers podcast. Yeah, there's always podcasts and books and TV and radio programs coming out about the Beatles. It's never going to die, is it? Let's be honest. And this podcast will certainly be going until the end of the year, and I'm pretty sure beyond, because I've already made tentative arrangements with certain people to record more discussions rather than interviews. Anyway, so I didn't get to do an intro this week, so you got a rambling outro instead. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope all is going well as... Well, in Britain, we're experiencing the second wave of the virus. In America, you're experiencing horrible presidential debates, although I'd argue not quite as horrible as 4 years ago. But everybody, stay safe, stay sane, try and keep smiling, and I'll be back very soon with a new show of Glass Onion on John Lennon. Subscribe, rate, review. I did actually get a 2-star review, so now I'm a bit wary of saying, yes, review the podcast. If you think it's worth 2 stars, then perhaps you could write to me first and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Give me a chance to put it right. But, 4 or 5-star reviews are always greatly appreciated. And it does, as I've said many times before, it increases the visibility of the show. That people get to hear it and then they can decide whether it's good or bad. So, on that note, I will say goodbye, wish you all the best, and see you soon.